Welcome to a breezy Black Horse Lake on the Great Linford Complex near Milton Keynes. This lake is renowned for feeder fishing and bream nets. There's some big weights come out on matches, but we're going to do something different today. We're going to focus on the pole. It's a little bit of an unknown quantity for me, but I'm told it's very good fishing. Lots of rudd and roach, so I'm hoping to sort of do a bit of whip fishing, short pole, show the difference between short lining and using the whip, the advantages on one compared with the other. We're going to look at some ground baits and the tactics, and these tactics I do use quite a lot on festivals at Tamar Lakes, Mucknow in Ireland, Bow Beach if the fish will come short. We've got a good depth, a good colour in the water, and yeah, let's look at some bait and hopefully we'll have a nice busy day. Right, so ground bait. Today I'm going to use from the Naturals range, go-to Roach Super Blend. So this ground bait's full of coriander, smells lovely, biscuit, hemp, maize, all the things that Roach like. I've used it a lot. It's quite sticky, so I can make, if I want to make little hard balls full of bait, that's an important part of my tactics. I can do that with this ground bait. So I'm going to use 2 kilos of Roach. And even though I'm not fishing for skimmers and bream or carp, obviously, I am going to add some fish meal to it, because I think even the roach are used to eating it, because what goes into a lot of these lakes is pellets, carp baits, fish meal baits when people are fishing for bream, and the roach eat it, there's no doubt about it. Even when I fish Tamar and Bow Beach, I put a bit of fish meal into me roach mix, if you like. So I've got a bag of Sweet Super Blend, which is not overly strong. It's sweet, complements the other ground bait. I've got a lot of confidence in it, so I'm going to put a bag in. So I've basically got 2/3 Roach, 1/3 Sweet Super Blend. Give it a good mix. Probably about 1.5 pints of water for a start. It's easy to mix. I'm not using a drill, and that's good enough for a first. That'll take probably another 1/2 pint to a pint of water, so we'll leave that to one side. You can see it's a nice, I've not gone for a dark mix either. I just can't see the point in these venues. The water's coloured. You're not going to get much predator action. It's not going to be a problem having a light coloured ground bait. And then the other baits I've got, basically natural baits. Hempen caster, which I can loose feed, or like I say, put into a right little sticky ball to sort of make a depth charge to go to the bottom. I've got worms, which can be a good hook bait, the head of a worm, and I can introduce some chopped worm in as well. And I've got red maggots, some lovely fresh ones I got this morning, right big ones they are. And I've got some that are about a week old, which are tougher. I can thread up the hook if I'm catching a lot of fish, and just sort of a more durable hook bait. I'll probably fish maggots or worms on the hook because they're durable. So that's the bait. Another nice roach. So we've been fishing about 20 minutes, and to start the peg off, I chucked in 5 biggish balls of ground bait, squeezed reasonably tightly to get to the bottom, with hempen caster and a few maggots in. And as I sort of expect, after putting a volume of bait in, the initial spell of bites can be a bit iffy because the fish are coming onto that volume of bait and they're not confident yet. So I've missed an odd bite, but I've started feeding little balls of ground bait, quite hard, Another fish, another roach. I've had a couple of skimmers, I've had a perch, and I'm catching mostly roach, sort of 2 to 4 ounce. And when you fish a whip, you're sort of fishing over an area. It's not like fishing the long pole where you're just dropping it in the same spot every time. So my feed is, I'm being reasonably accurate. I'm throwing the ground bait just short of the float, and I've loose fed a bit as well, just to try and sort of initially draw fish in. Oh, that one went a bit short, but there you go. That's a better fish. So I'm sort of trying to create a big area of attraction. Oh, it's a perch. What I really want to do is just chuck in ground bait. I don't really want to loose feed because I don't want to draw the fish up in the water. I want to catch them near the bottom. So because I've had 2 little skimmers, I don't really know what's in here. Obviously, I'm finding out as we go along. But because I caught 2 little hand-sized skimmers, I've introduced a little bit of chopped worm into the mix straight away, because they're nice little fish. If there's a few of them about, they like worms. Oh, come off. So you can see the fish are a little bit iffy, but I'm getting plenty of bites. We're going to catch plenty of fish. So within my ground bait bowl, I've got 2 little areas. I've got one area which I've laced with hempen caster and a little bit of chopped worm, in this case, an odd maggot. So that's like a little rich mix, which I'm going to chuck in, rock hard those little balls, so they get to the bottom and form a bed of bait. All those particles nicely breaking up on the bottom and keeping the fish down. Now that's great and is the best way to feed it. But I'll have another area in my ground bait bowl where I've over wetted the ground bait and it's not so rich in particles. And that's really to try and, if I feel like the fish are a bit iffy and drifting away from me, I'll chuck that in for a little while to make a nice cloud. There won't be too much bait in it, it's more about making the cloud. And I might loose feed a bit as well. So little depth charge, rock hard, is the best way, I think, usually. But if they're not having it, just have a little go with the softer, not so rich mix. Okay, I'm just going to talk through the tackle, the setup I'm using. Obviously I've got into the lake with a platform, got comfortable. The further out you can get within reason, the better, because the nearer the depth you'll be. Get out of the margins, basically. And at the moment I'm fishing a 4.5 metre whip. This is a telescopic whip, Italian whip, Hydra. It's an A911. It's quite a stiff whip. You get all different action whips. I've got some which are softer. This one's very tip action, so it's good for lifting the fish out, like reasonable fish. You might bump an odd extra fish because it's stiff compared with a soft whip, but it's quicker lifting them in. So there's pros and cons to sort of every type of design. I like this one. It's very light, very stiff. So one of the things, whip fishing is a method that's quite dear to my heart, really, because I learned a lot about it when I lived in Italy, especially about bleak fishing, and it was something I had no experience of, and I put a lot of time into it while I was there because I had to be able to compete against Italians, and I got taught by some of the best anglers there, including Milo. So one thing that I do, and if you watch any Italian anglers do it, they all do it, is they hold the whip right at the end. You won't see anybody holding a whip like a rod. Now the reason for that is, if you hold it there and have your rig so the fish is coming to hand here, you're losing a bit of length of the whip, if that makes sense. You're fishing closer in. You're going to have to use a longer whip to get further out. So you'll see on a lot of whips there's an area here with different colour graphics as well, and that's sort of where to hold it. You're using the maximum amount of the whip. You'll fish better because a lot of whip fishing is it's all in the wrist, the way you strike, controlled. and mending the line and everything. I mean, this is the way I'm used to doing it, so that's how I do it. Now, the thing to consider when you're whip fishing is the length of your rig compared with the length of the whip, and that really depends on the type of fish you're going to catch. So it's a bit of a guessing game to start with, unless you know exactly what you're fishing for. So today you can see this whip, with the line slack, I've got the hook here. So I'm going to hold it here. The fish is going to come to hand, you know, somewhere where I can hold it, be under control, and work with it easily. There's no point having the hook up here, and when the fish comes in, all right, it's coming straight to your hand, but every time you want to bait up or do anything, the whip's bent round double. That's no good. If you were fishing for bleak, I would have the actual hook would be right down here. So when I swing the bleak in and I'm unhooking and baiting up, the line would almost be slack. If you've got a tight line, it's making everything hard for you while you're baiting up and unhooking. When you're fishing for this stamp fish, you can't avoid it, because if you had the hook down here, you swing the fish in, it's going to be in your lap every time. So it's something to play about with and practice really, and have a little go and work it out what's good for you. But like I say, don't have your hook up here, because you're just going to be working against yourself all the time. Now, float, hook, shot-in pattern, you don't want a thick main line when you're fishing the whip. So if I was bleak fishing, I would even go down to 08 or 09 main line, because I'd be fishing with very small floats, real finesse stuff. And the thin main line, the reason for it is it's not affected so much by the wind as a thick line. So obviously I can't fish 08 direct today for these fish, I'd just get snapped. So you have to think about what you're doing. I've made it on 012, it's an accurate 012, it's not 014. And that sort of given me a sort of compromise between mending my line, good presentation, still strong, and then I've gone down to an 010 hook length. The hook length is 6 inches. I've got a 16 IM67 Hydra, which is a long shank hook. It's got a decent barb on it, so I shouldn't lose too many fish. And then I've got an Olivet, probably about a foot from my loop, with 2 number 9 droppers. I've got 3 number 9s, or they're probably number 8s actually, underneath the Olivet. I've got 3 little stots above it, number 12 stots for trimming up my float. And I've got an inline Olivet, but I've plugged it with a bit of float stem. So I've put the Olivet on the line, and then I've pushed a float antenna in, or stem, bit of carbon or a bit of plastic, just to plug it, so it's a tight fit. So that will move when I want it to, but it won't slide around, it won't bounce and hit the shot. It's rock solid. Float wise, now you could, if you wanted to do it the traditional Italian way, you'd have a pencil float on, which is lovely to fish with, but if it's very windy like it can be in this country and in Ireland, I generally go for a sort of rugby ball shaped float. This is a Hydra Mincho, which is like a bog standard sort of float with a plastic tip and a carbon stem. And what I've done, this float was probably a couple of inches longer to start with, and I've just trimmed down the tip, trimmed down the stem, just to make it a bit shorter. There's no hard and fast sort of rules on this, it's just for whip fishing, a shorter float is going to go in quicker, just suits the style of fishing. And it's got a carbon stem, that is important. You don't want a wire stem really, unless it's a very thin one, because you're casting the Olivet, the float's got to follow the Olivet. You want it to weigh as little as possible, and when you're striking, you know, you don't want the float wrapping over if you lose a fish or miss a bite or doing anything strange. So that's a sort of a nice float, a standard float, but it's got a couple of important features for whip fishing that suits it. So that's my setup really. Simple, but you know, a few things that you have to get right to sort of maximise your catch rate. Well, we fished for about 3.5 hours, nearly 4 hours maybe. Over £20, quite comfortably. Here's one of the little skimmers caught at the start. Some nice roach. Had a little run of rudd. Basically, brilliant fishing. Great place to come and practice. It's on a day ticket. So if you enjoy whip fishing and want to fill your boots, this is a place to come. And those rudd. Few perch. Everyone a swimmer.